Hello, everyone, and welcome to our chat with Eve Ashwell, who is an editor and partner at London-based commercial post house, The Assembly Rooms. She cuts commercials, content, and short films, and has worked with Wrigley's, Dairy Lee, Booking.com, and of course, ASDA, which is the commercial we're going to talk about today. Eve has cut the rather fantastic ASDA Christmas ad, which is taking the UK by storm because it features Will Ferrell's infamous character or famous character, Elf.
Yes.
So, Eve, can you tell us a little bit about this brilliant ad and how it kind of came into when did you first sort of get the script for this?
I got the script, I think, in July.
Mm-hmm.
And it was directed by Danny Kleinman, who's at Rattling Stick, who's somebody I've worked with a bunch over the years, and I love working with him. And yeah, I got a phone call from Johnny Frankel from Rattling Stick one sunny July afternoon saying, we've got this great thing that we're doing. And he gave me kind of like the outline of the concept for it. Would you be interested? It's going to be, roughly these days and kind of this much work. So I was like, yes, absolutely, of course. I'm such a nut for Christmas. I just get very excited about Christmas. July, I haven't got excited about Christmas in July before.
They always say Christmas in July, don't they?
Yeah.
In commercial land, yeah.
Yeah, I think this one was particularly early just because it was obviously, there was so much post in it.
Mm-hmm.
Normally I do Christmas ads around sort of, September, August, September, October. But anyway, I got the phone call, said yes. And then within a few days, he sent over all the, scripts and NDAs, obviously. And then I did a call, I think it was the 1st of August, I did a call with like a kickoff call, basically, with Danny, Johnny, Amy, who is a producer, and the agency. And we just talked mostly about process, like how was this going to come together? Because obviously it wasn't a traditional way of making something. So we talked through that. We talked through different bits within the script. And then I started the next day. So I think I started on the 2nd of August.
Mm-hmm. So
and I did, sorry?
No, that really is a huge, yeah.
It was. And I did about 3 weeks editing on it before they shot. And then they shot for a week. And then I did about 4 weeks editing, before they shot. They shot for a week. And then I did about 2 or 3 weeks editing after the shoot.
So tell us a bit, because obviously, so again, for wider context, I'm sure anyone watching this will have absolutely seen the ad, but Elf is put in these scenes that he's not actually been shot in.
Right.
So you've taken moments from the film that are real.
Exactly.
He wasn't filmed.
No.
By Will Ferrell.
Which weirdly, a lot of people thought he was.
It's that good that it feels like he has been.
Yeah.
So when you're editing before they shoot, what are you editing? What does that look like? Are you pulling things from?
Yeah. So basically there was a script, which had, I believe, gone through lots of, permutations before I even saw it. And when I saw the script initially, it was so funny because I was reading it, and of course you're reading it and you're sick. I know that film. I love that film so much, and so I'm familiar with it. And I was reading it and seeing all of the scenes as that were written down, and thinking like, wow, how is this going to come together, and how is it also going to fit in 90 seconds? That was terrifying as well to begin with, because it didn't feel like it would work. Mm-hmm. And then I got the movie, loaded it into the Avid, and then basically pulled out all the bits that were in the script, but I also pulled out anything that I thought might be useful sort of down the line, because at that point we had certainly I didn't, I'm sure Danny had imagined it all, but at that point I had no clue sort of what the interlinking shots were going to be, or what the shots that we were going to put Buddy into were going to be. So I was kind of looking for anything outside of what I had to pull just from the script. I was looking for anything that might be useful. like an expression or a reaction to something, or even Buddy like moving around, not like non-verbal stuff that could be used as like linking shots between scenes. Because I think the thing I thought at the beginning could potentially be the pitfall would be that it would feel like kind of like vignettes, you know, because you're working with what you've got, and so it's hard to sort of link it all together. And I think we sort of found quite a clever way of making it feel like one piece as opposed to different scenes from the film. You know, it felt like one story. So I was pulling all those kind of bits out as the initial kind of pass, like doing selects and stuff, plus all the bits that were needed because they were in the script. And then I started to just sort of put it together, but it was really hard because all the bits in between that you see in the finished thing like didn't exist. And they also kind of, well, they did exist on paper, but literally just as words, obviously. So it was kind of working out in my head what you would need to put in, what would those shots be. And I worked a lot with Danny on that, and we sort of ended up writing literally just titles, white titles on like a black frame, quite a descriptive shot idea. Okay, so then you see Buddy from behind, and he walks down that aisle, and there's a child, and you know, you kind of like make it up what the shot's going to be. But that was weirdly very challenging for my brain anyway. I'm sure it wasn't for Danny's. But then we got a storyboard artist to draw those frames, which was brilliant. But there was a lot. I mean, I think he drew maybe like 45 frames or something, because also the script was changing as this process was going over these 4 weeks. The script was changing, not massively, but it was changing because the client perhaps wanted something. They wanted to showcase something in the ASDA store in a different way. Or we, through the process, realized it was going to be over length, or there was just a preference for something different. So the whole time we were just sort of like updating it as we were going. And then we dropped in the storyboard shots, which was great, actually, because you really then do start to kind of imagine how it's going to look. And pretty much the edit was locked, signed off before they shot. It sort of had to be. There was no. I
want to say, so I think people don't realize always the fact that once you get into that realm of all the visual effects and the rotoscoping and everything, you need to be in position, and the filming, that you know exactly what it is you're going in to film. There's no ad-libbing and all of this sort of stuff, because it has to be as it's planned.
Exactly.
So was it quite a collaborate? So between you and director really sort of molding it in the kind of, I suppose, kind of like an animatic sort of pre-visual sort of.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, there was still the same process in as much as we cut something. I kind of cut something, obviously Danny, and shared it with him. And then we worked back and forth like you would normally. And then at the point we were sort of feeling good, we shared it with the agency, and incorporated their feedback. And then when they were feeling good, we shared it with the client and incorporated their feedback. And obviously we had to share it with Will too. Tell
us a bit about that, because I think, again, people keep saying, oh, Will, did you know you're in this ad? Well, yeah, he doesn't know he's in this ad. So how did did you get like direct feedback from him? What did that look like?
I didn't. I was very removed from that. And actually, I don't think he had any feedback. I think he really liked it, I think. I mean, certainly there was nothing major that came up from him seeing it. But of course, you need to make sure he's happy before you shoot, and you need to make sure he's happy before you've kind of finished every single effect shot, because otherwise you can't show it to him at the final finished point, because you'd be in a mess if he did have issues with it. But yeah, he certainly knew it was happening, and we had to have, it couldn't have happened without him approving it to happen, basically. So he was involved in that respect, but I didn't have any communication with him in any way.
He wasn't sitting in your edits.
No. Yeah, can you imagine? Dressed as the elf.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would have hoped. So, I mean, obviously, you know, it's such a well-loved character and a well-loved film. Like, what did it feel like just being a part of that? You know, you love the film as well. Like, what was the general vibe with people being able to work on a project like this?
It was really fun. It's definitely one of the most fun jobs I've ever done. And part of that's working with Danny and Johnny and Amy and Rattling Stick and Havas, who were brilliant to work with. And part of that was the working with the movie and it being Christmassy and it feeling really, it felt exciting, like what we were doing. It's not often you're working on something that feels like it's really sort of testing the boundaries of what can be done in a sort of VFX way. And so that felt kind of exciting to be a part of. And I really love, you know, one of my favorite bits of being an editor is the kind of puzzle solving aspect of it. And this was literally from the beginning to the end, it was a real puzzle, like figuring it out, you know, like I was saying, those storyboard shots and working out. I had a much heavier involvement in that respect than I perhaps would ordinarily on a job. And so doing that with really sort of collaborative and creative, brilliant people was really fun and exciting and rewarding. And a part of that obviously was the fact that we were working with a film that's really loved, although every time I had to go in and find like a new bit or an express or something, I'd lose like 20 minutes because I'd just watch.
Yeah, you just want to watch it.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh no, I've got so much to do. What am I doing?
So in terms of just going back to like those moments that you picked out in between, what the ones of, like you said, non-verbal, just movement and the expressions, like which one, how many did you have? Like what was that selects and how many were actually used in the end? So outside of the script and those lines.
Yeah.
What was that?
Quite a few, I guess I had. And initially he does do a lot of really good facial expressions in that movie. That's one of his.
There's a smile towards the end of the ad. They just like, you know,
yeah,
the lady at the till.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like yeah, I love to. Smiling's my favorite. Yeah, and the kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably pulled out maybe like 20, 25, and I guess maybe 3, 4, 5 ended up in the film. But it also, it's that funny thing where, you know, when you're making, like I sort of said before, the edit we had was before the shoot was basically the edit. I mean, it wasn't in as much as there wasn't any live footage in it that they shot, but the scenes were there, the structure was there, the timings were pretty much there. And there's that funny thing when you do jobs like this where you've got an edit that's done and finished and sort of approved in as much as it can be, but you're working with half the material. You know, you've still got the reactions and the dialogue and the performances from the real actors to put in. And at the point before the shoot, you're just working with a still drawn frame or a, you know, previs type, you know, kind of robotic animation. And so it was me talking. I did all the dialogue for the actors, which is like painful to hear 20,000 times a day when you're cutting it. But yeah, between me and I think two of our producers at work, we voiced everybody because of course you don't have the real thing at that point, and none of us are actors. So you're working with these performances that aren't good because it's me and other people, and you are working with like a flat 2D kind of image. So you have to keep in mind that when you're picking reactions from Buddy, because you can't, you know, it has to work together. It has to play, they have to play off each other. And he's a very exuberant character, and you just couldn't push it too far in some of the scenes because it just would have taken it over the edge of something. So
if his reaction doesn't match that actor's, it would have, right, jointed and
exactly. But equally, I had to have all those shots in the bag before they shot. So it was kind of like slightly backwards in that respect. But then I think it, you know, and that's where sort of new eyes on it is really helpful, like sharing it with creatives and their sort of team inside the agency, because you get like, you can get a little numb to things sometimes when you're watching them a lot, and having someone be like, actually that reaction feels too big, too silly, too extreme.
Yeah.
And so that was really helpful. Yeah. But it was an interesting experience cutting something, and sort of almost having it finished before they'd even shot.
Was it quite hard to sell in that edit to, agency client, because they have to use so much of their imagination? And I think that, you want to hope that people, understand all the caveats and everything, but it can be hard sometimes. So what other things, like maybe sound effects, music, all of that, did you put in to try and sell that edit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, because it is really hard, I think, for people to, to have that confidence to sign something off that is a sort of, 50%, not even, 20% of something. I did put in a lot of sound effects, and actually the music that's in there is the music I put on right at the start. That is, to me, is like the classic Christmas song. So yeah. We had a lot of different iterations of that song, but for me, it was always going to be that version, personally. Not that I get the final say at all in these things, but I put that on because, to me, that's like the classic Christmas bit of music. And then it got all the way through, which was great. But yeah, I did lots of sound bits and pieces. And then actually it was quite tricky, because at that stage we were cutting with the finished movie, and what we ultimately got further down the line was the stems, all the skits, all the audio.
I was going to say that's all merged together. So they were able to give you all the separated.
Yeah, my brother is a sound designer, and he did the sound on it.
Amazing. He's a proper family family affair. I love that.
He's over at 750 mph, and I called him. I actually didn't, because I was NDA'd, I didn't say what the project was. I just said, actually I was at lunch with him, and I said, I'm going to be working on this thing, and I gave him the kind of overview of what it would be. And I said, this is before I'd even started, and I said, is there anything you can think of that might trip us up from an audio point of view, because I want to flag it now with production. And he said, oh my God, you've got to be able to get the stems. Like, they might not exist, and you need to kind of know now. And if they don't exist, or if you can't get them, we should sort of look at, he didn't know he was going to be on the job at this point. Yeah. But somebody should look at trying to see whether you can, because a lot of that film has music on it.
Yeah, you've got the voice, the music underneath it all, the ambient sound of
exactly
and stuff in the shot,
or sound effects that won't apply to the shot you've put him in, and you have to be able to separate off. And so he was great, because I then felt very confident being able to go to Rattling Stick and say, I think, firstly, can we get stems? Do they exist? If they do, will we get them? And if not, once we've got an edit everybody's feeling good about, should we not spend a few hours doing the sound, doing a rough test to make sure that you can extrapolate out those unwanted bits of audio? Because otherwise, at the end of it, it's going to sound like a mess. And at that point, when you come to naturally do the sound in the process anyway, once the edit's done, we'd be in a right old pickle. We wouldn't. It's shot. Everything's done.
You kind of go into this territory of needing Will to come in and ADR stuff.
Right, exactly, which was another thing that we asked about as well, for that reason. So
if they didn't have the stems, would you have had to go down that route?
Possibly, yeah, possibly. But they did, and we got them, and so that was great. But at the stage up, the pre-shoot stage, we didn't have them yet, just because they hadn't come our way.
Sure.
And so, it was you know what? I was so impressed at the sound. That sounds really patronizing, but I was really pleased that everybody was so trusting, because it was a big leap of faith in a lot of ways, and that trust comes from Danny's body of work being so unbelievably impressive, and
yours.
Oh, thank you. And the agency having made, and the team behind it having made lots of sort of VFX-y work in the past too. And so I think the agency's trust in Danny and the client's trust in the agency and Danny was the reason that something that was very baby, part of the process got signed off, and everybody was amazing. Everybody was so trusting, and there was so much confidence in what could have gone horribly wrong, you know.
Well, you think about it and you think, even though the idea is wonderful, like it's one of those ones where that you can get it wrong.
Totally.
You can tonally get it wrong and things. But obviously that absolutely didn't happen, but that must have, it must have had that kind of nervous moment of like, is this
well, also with the VFX, I mean, it kind of lives and dies on its believability, doesn't it? And you know you're going to get the good performance from Will because it exists already, and you know you're going to get good performances from the actors that have been cast because that's what Danny does. But yeah, for sure, the whole believability of it and the sort of real, you know, being able to believe that Buddy's in that ASDA store is what makes the ad. And that's why working with Framestore was brilliant, because you just, you know, I've done sort of VFXy jobs before, and you find out this, I'm obviously not naming any names at all, but you find out who the post house is and you're like, oh God, it just might not work as well as it kind of could. And obviously Danny works with Framestore all the time, and that's his sort of preference of post house, and so kind of assumed it would be them right off the bat. And then, but knowing it was them obviously makes you feel so much more confident, and like you can sleep at night because you know it's going to be good. Yeah,
they're going to bring it to life properly.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about the pre-shoot. So were you there on the shoot itself? Did you?
No, I was asked to be, but I said no. I just wasn't around.
Okay.
Basically, the pre-edit was finished about 2 weeks before they shot, because there needed to be a window of time for Framestore to do what they needed to do to the edit in terms of like rotoscoping and building out the scan, the LiDAR scan and everything that they had done in order to make the environment for Buddy to be in. Obviously they built sets, but
there was a great deal, because there's a brilliant behind the scenes of the shoot itself. So there's a lot of blue screen, that you've got a certain amount of the store, but then the blue screen gives you the mass of the rest. They also on set, they're putting Buddy in, he's already been rotoscoped.
Yes, so exactly. So they needed that window of time to do all of that, sort of those bits and pieces they needed to do in order to be prepared for the shoot.
Yeah.
And in that 2 week time, I started another job, which then carried on over the shoot. So I didn't get to go, which I was really sad about, because I really liked being on set, and I particularly like being on Danny's sets because they're always just really fun. And so I asked another one of our editors to go down, because I think it was important that somebody was there. It's one of those jobs where you kind of a lot of the time when you cut on set, you're really in it. You're you know, every take you're dropping it in. Have we got it? Can we move on? You know, you're really like part of that sort of process. This sort of one, it was like there was probably only about 30 minutes a day if you squeezed it all together, where it was so vital for someone to be there, but it was still 30 minutes a day. That meant that they weren't kind of having to go back into the movie and be like, oh, because you know, you had to, like, for instance, there's a bit where Buddy is sitting on the floor when the buggy, the kid in the buggy comes up. And obviously that's not Buddy, that's not Will sitting on the floor in the wide shot. That's a Buddy body double.
Yeah.
And just to get like the head continuity of the head turn, we needed to add a few more frames onto the beginning of the real Buddy shot to make that continuity work. But we hadn't done that in the previous because we hadn't really known we'd need it. And so instead of like having to go back through a movie whilst you're waiting to shoot and be like, do those frames exist? Is that going to cut together? They could just go straight over to the editor and be like, do those frames exist? Will it cut together? And within 5 minutes, they have an answer. So it saved a lot of time. So I was really sad to not be there because, it looked like a really fun shoot, but they did have
how many days shoot was it?
5
days. So they shot for the whole week, and then so after the shoot, what elements is it mostly kind of with Framestore at that point, or what was your involvement continuing on? And then from like the sound mix and the grade, are you do you come in and input, or is your part?
Yeah, so after the shoot, I did about 2 weeks more cutting, and really that was about picking the performance takes of the actors.
Of course, yeah.
In the way that you would sort of traditionally. And, you know, like I say, you've kind of already got 50% of it, but you don't have the other 50. So you're putting in the performance takes, and you're making sure that they work with Buddy, both in terms of like timings. That was obviously really important, because you don't have alternate takes of Buddy to change. So they had to work. And obviously they were kind of doing that on set, but it's, you know, once you get into the edit, things become more nuanced and finessed. But also like positioning. So they had a Buddy body double on set who was dressed in the elf costume, who was the same height as Will. So they were using him to do eyeline, you know, to make sure the eye lines were going to be right with the actors. And then they'd shoot a few takes with him, and then he would go, and then they would shoot it with the empty space. So, you know, when I put Buddy in with them, with the actors, sometimes you might have to like move him around a little bit. Is that quite right? Is it gonna, you know, does it feel real?
They're looking like a certain way, and they're kind of missing each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So you kind of, you know, shift him around a little bit, but actually not that much. It was pretty perfect. But yes, performance takes really, and then getting it to time, because when you do animatics and previses, there's always this real danger of you don't put the shot on for long enough, because you can read a still very quickly. And so when you're, you know, often this happens when we're asked to do animatics before a job, not even a posty job, but just like a job that maybe the timings are going to be a little tight, and they want the confidence of knowing how it's kind of going to work before they shoot. And so I'm always like, what does future Eve need that shot? How long does future Eve need that shot to be? Because I'm only going to be tripping myself up if I try and get everything in to this time frame. And actually then when I get the material, I'm like, it's a nightmare. So you have to be, everybody gets really excited, and it's like, oh, let's put everything in. And that works. Just take some, you know, frames off of those shots. And you're like, well, yeah, we can do that now because you're looking at a drawing. But down the line, that's going to be a nightmare. And it's me that's going to have to like figure it out. So I had to kind of say a few times, like, guys, we have to lose a shot. Basically, we're not going to get this through just taking frames off. So obviously that did end up happening, and we did have to lose a few shots that they shot because and also, you know, you want things to land. You don't want to like cut out too quickly of like a funny moment or a good expression.
Well, this is the thing about comedy generally, isn't it? Of course,
exactly.
It's all genres and editing, but comedy especially,
it's timing.
Like, it can not work or work based on a tiny little amount of time.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, you want things to have their moments to land. And also pre the shoot, of course, we didn't know how long the delivery performances from the actors were going to be, or their expressions or anything like that. So yeah, this very long way of answering your question, but the bit after the shoot was basically picking out the takes like you would normally, and basically, you know, shaping it and getting it into 90 seconds. That was the sort of big part of it. And then, you know, once we had a 90 that was approved by the pretty much everybody, I think, like agency and client, it went to Framestore, who already had the rotoscoped Buddy, but obviously that was just the beginning of a mountain of work. And my involvement was still, you know, relatively high, because whilst when I provided my EDLs for the edit, I gave them a bunch of plates and, you know, extra bits and pieces that I knew they were going to need. Once they actually start putting everything together, it's like, oh God, that's not going to work. Or, you know, not necessarily like performances, but like, I'm trying to think of things that we had to change, but we were doing calls, or at least I was. I'm sure everyone else was more involved than me at this stage, but I was doing calls like twice a week with Framestore for about 4 or 5 weeks, Zooms, where we watch the latest whip, and they would talk through what they've done, what they still had to do. Everybody on the call would, say anything that they were wanted changed or added to the list of things to do. But there would be a few things where it's like, that now that you've got them in and you've put the plate on the background, is the plate too soft? Should it be a little sharper? And then of course it's just much quicker for me to go back in and find those things and re-provide codes or different EDLs for things. So my involvement, whilst it wasn't like days of stuff, although actually for a few weeks after the 90 being approved, I was doing a cut down. So I was still kind of on it every day.
Oh, so how many cut downs is there?
There was a 60, a 30. They were like the main two, and then there was a bunch of like smaller ones that I can't remember now, but there were like 6s. And
were they done very much after the fact then, or were they also worked on pre-shoot?
No, they were done after. No, that's not true. We did a 60 and a 30 previs.
Yeah. It feels like you'd need to know.
Yes, you're absolutely. You know what? You're absolutely right. That was really important. To know that you could tell the story in that time, and also to flag anything you might need to do slightly differently or slightly quicker in order to make it fit. Yeah, you're totally right. That was a really big part of it, actually. When we were in that stage, we had to make sure we had a 60 and a 30 that everybody.
You're really focusing on 3 different edits, 3 different things, telling the same story, but being able to do more, obviously, with a 90.
Well, yeah, and also what was hard about the 60 was kind of okay to cut. That wasn't that challenging, but 30 were really difficult because, firstly, there are required scenes that the client wants because they want to showcase a certain thing, like a food product or something.
Yeah,
like the when he's eating the sausage things, that had to be in. But you've also only got so much that you can shave time from, or include or not include, because the scenes are quite self-contained.
Yes.
You can't. I'm not going to
just use one shot from each scene.
Right, exactly.
Use the scene or you don't.
Yes, exactly. And you can't. You can shave frames of it, of course, but you can't make them longer. The shots of Buddy are the shots of Buddy. They exist in the way they exist, and so that was a bit. Actually, the 30 was quite challenging, and I think we had 3 or 4 different options because you have to do those. What are they called? Like high fat sugar food edits now.
Oh yeah, of course. So you can't include certain foods like the mince pies or something
before a certain time because of kids watching. Yeah. So we had to do edits for that too.
Yeah, gosh, so interesting. So, I mean, I really want to talk about a bit about your career as well, but is there anything else about the process? Like, how was the ad received when it first went? There's always such a big build up to Christmas ads generally. When it first went on air, what was the general?
I think it's been really, really well received. I mean, I feel like it has. The first day it came out, I think it came out on the 4th of November.
Yeah, I think that's.
And I think it was the day before Guy Fawkes. And I went on YouTube at maybe like 11 a.m. or something, and it had been watched at that point, like, I don't know, 20,000 times. And there was like a few hundred comments. I think it's obviously much, like it's in the millions now in terms of YouTube views, but it seems to be really positive. I think that, everybody, unless you're like a complete Scrooge, everybody loves that movie. And so it's like heartwarming. He kind of embodies the spirit of Christmas. And so, I'm sure some people don't like it, but I feel like generally it's been well received. And I think also what's been nice about it is that, and this isn't always the case, is that people can appreciate, even non-industry people, people can really appreciate how much work's gone into that ad.
Yeah.
When you do read those comments, it's like, wow,
how did they do this?
How did they do that? And God, it looks so real. And it's really nice when you've worked on something and you've seen the skill that goes into it, and not me, but like, the VFX and everything, that Danny's done, and it's really nice when that's recognized and people kind of appreciate that you've really worked hard for a long time on making something look a certain, be a certain standard.
Well, I can tell you it's got 2.2 million views.
Oh, has it? There you
go. As of today, the 1st of December. So that's not bad, is it, for an ad?
It's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad at all.
One thing actually, just as we're on it, and again, the realism and the work that goes into it, the grade, I'd love to just quickly get a bit of your thoughts on the importance of that color grade with just making it look the quality that it does.
So I have to admit I was not in the grade because it was done right at the end and I was on a job and I couldn't go. But certainly the difference in the whips that we were receiving every few days from Frame Store. Each time you got a new one, it would just come on like leaps and bounds, and it was like a joy to sort of watch the progress being made. But there was this thing of like, okay, well, how do you now, as impressive as it was all looking, and it really was looking amazing, there's still that element of it's two different things that have been put together, two different films essentially put together. And I think it was really important that the grade, I mean, the thing that the grade really did was bed them together. So it felt genuinely like he was there. And of course you could do that with the VFX and the way it's all, the shots layered and put together. But a big part of it's the grade, because if you're working with a film, I can't remember now when that film was shot, but I think it was like early
2002 or something.
Yeah.
It's 20 years old.
Yeah. Sure. And being able to make them look like the same one film, essentially, like totally believable as one film, a huge part of that was the grade. And actually seeing the master, essentially, when I got sent that, just before it aired, it was like, oh, okay, good. Yeah. That totally works. And a huge part, that's the grade.
2003.
There you go. You've got so many facts at your fingertips, Kim.
Well, it's the beauty of Google and doing this on Zoom, isn't it? So thank you so much. I think it's just so interesting to know about that process and the length of time and the different stages that it takes to get to what, we see. Yes, people appreciate it, but I don't know, I think this has definitely given some fantastic insight into that. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So your experience and your journey as an editor, I'd love to sort of know a little bit more about how you started in editing and what got you to where you are today as a partner at a post house and obviously an editor. So can you tell us when did you first know you wanted to be
I first knew when I was an assistant. I didn't go to an editing company wanting to become an editor. I went to a tiny editing company in Soho, which had 3 editors, and did work experience when I was 16 and really, really enjoyed it. I mean, so much fun. Like, you're 16 years old, it's the summer.
Young as well.
It was like a school thing. I think everybody had to do like 2 weeks work experience. And I ended up at this editing company doing it, and it was just brilliant. It was like so fun, did not feel like work. Just felt like a really exciting, interesting, creative sort of environment. And then I would go back. I loved it so much. When I was doing my A-levels, I would go back during like the summer, Christmas holidays and stuff. And then when I finished my A-levels, I knew I didn't want to go to university. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to do something kind of creative and sort of interesting. And they offered me a full-time job. So I went there as a full-time runner. And then after about a year, I became the only assistant. It was a tiny place. I became the only assistant there. And I think it was when I was an assistant and I started to spend time in with the editors and see what they were doing, both when they were like alone working, getting things together and in shape, but also when they had clients come in. I'm sitting there and watching and learning. So then my brain started to go, oh, hang on a minute, this is actually fascinating and feels like the perfect marriage of lots of skills that I wanted to have, but also felt would come naturally to me. You know, that kind of blend of obviously creative, like storytelling, but also, you know, and a little bit technical, but also like the sort of other skills that don't
people skills.
The people skills, exactly, and the people reading and the communication and the problem solving and all the elements that come to make something, the post side of it, the sound, the music, all of those things. I was interested in all of that, and it kind of just ticked all the right boxes, and then I was kind of hooked after that, and then there was, you know, no stopping me. Mm-hmm. And then I assisted for maybe, I assisted for a long time. I assisted probably for about 6 years. Not just there, I moved somewhere else. I moved to a bit much bigger company, and assisted the owner of that company, who was busy all the time. And then after about 2 years of that, I became an editor. So that was, I became an editor about almost 20 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Which
so many stories, I bet.
Yeah. It feels like, it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it has.
Has it always been? So the post house you were at, where you did your work experience, that was commercial?
Yeah, just commercials. And then when I moved to the bigger place, it was a lot of music videos as well. I mean, mainly commercials, but music videos and short films and content. And it was just so much bigger. They had like, it was like 20 editors or something, and where I'd been before was 3, and just me assisting. And then I moved to Cut and Run, and I think there were 10 assistants when I moved there. So it was just a like total eye-opening experience.
Yeah, I bet. You've got your assistant squad, and they've all got their own challenges, because again, it is very much down to who you're assisting, you know, in terms of how busy you are and what kind of clients you're working with, and what their personalities are like. So when you moved into becoming a fully fledged editor, did that happen at Cut and Run, or did that happen at?
That happened at Cut and Run. Yeah, when I was, I'd been there about 2 years, and I became an editor, and I kind of can't really remember exactly what happened, but I think, you know, like most assistants, you start to pick up clients, and you start to kind of, you know, you're doing stuff out of hours, and you're doing bits and pieces for the editors that you work with, like, you know, versions, cut downs, that kind of thing. And then just slowly, it's like, it's not an overnight thing, as you know, it's a snowball thing, and it takes a really long time. And, you know, one of the reasons I moved to Cut and Run was because the place I was it just felt small, and I just didn't feel like I would ever be the editor. I wasn't getting the exposure.
Yeah. There's certain types of work that come into bigger places. Yeah. Because it's down to you and the relationships you build, but it's also down to the name of that post house, the exec producers you have there that are getting that work in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the exposure at Cut and Run was just far greater, bigger stuff. So and then it kind of it didn't like happen overnight by any means, and actually there was some really wonky years there where I was like, what am I doing? This is awful. I'm never going to become an editor, like a proper busy editor. It was, you know, it's really like hard. But then I did. And so that was fine. Then it all
and so
came good.
Becoming, how long have you been a partner, and what does it mean to be a partner at a post house like the Assembly Rooms?
Well, I was a partner at Cut and Run as well. So I was there for 12 years, and the final 6 years I was a partner there. But it was a very different, I wasn't an owner, I was just like a partner. It was a very different sort of gig. When I went to Assembly Rooms, I went in as an owner, and from day one. And I think, what does it mean? I mean, obviously, just from a day-to-day point of view, you're just helping to run a business with your partners, of which I have 2, and plus we have our MD who, you know, helps us to run the business. But
so it's about company direction, and
it's about company direction. It's everything. We're a small business, so it is everything. It's the new carpet to the hiring of, you know, staff, to the finding of editors, to the bigger picture direction of, do we want to be in America? Do we want to focus? Do we want to try and do more documentaries? Do we want to try and put some focus on features? It's all of that combined, plus the kind of really like, hey guys, we need to replace the tea mugs because they're looking a bit chipped. It's like literally everything in between.
All very important though.
It is. It is.
So before we wrap up, because I'm conscious of time, what is your advice? Because I feel like you will have advice, and let's focus, because again, Edit Girls is all about women in post and ensuring that this just feels like incredibly accessible and doable for women and gender diverse editors who may see a stereotype of what what an editor should be.
Looks like, yeah.
Looks like, exactly. What's your advice for someone, let's say they're 16 and they're looking at this industry? What is your advice? What's your advice for 16-year-old Eve?
Don't do it. No.
Yeah, you don't.
Get out.
Yeah.
My advice would be okay, I'll keep this short because I could talk about this for a really long time, but I think, and this is just my viewpoint, obviously, I can only speak for myself. I think it's really important to work as an assistant. I think when I started, editing software was not accessible. It was very expensive and really just in the kind of professional domain. Now that has obviously changed massively in the 24, 5, 6 years. And there's a lot of good that comes with that. There's a lot of good for people to be able to start, if they want to, edit, really early and figure out if it is something that they want to do. It's a long career path, to get to a place of, interesting work, creative fulfillment, and financial, stability as a job. So it's really great that has become much more accessible, and courses, uni courses, college courses, where you can really work on proper kit and have that experience. The downside to it is that you don't assist. A lot of the editors that are out and about nowadays, either not within a company or signed somewhere, particularly over the last couple of years because of kind of lockdown and stuff, they've taught themselves to edit, which is a fantastic thing, and they have picked up clients because there's a lot of work out there, that sort of content, branded content type of work, music videos as well, where they are able to pick that sort of stuff up and create relationships with clients, which is really good. But it does mean that then there's a tipping point where people then want to be at a company for, the benefits that come with that. And they want to go in as an editor, because why would they not? They think they are an editor. They have been editing. But I do think that there is a downside to it, not for everybody, but a lot of the time, where there's so much to gain from being an assistant in terms of learning through watching. You learn by doing, definitely, but you also learn by watching, and being exposed to really good editors working on lots of different types of things is formative in the editor you then become, because you pick and choose, and you even people you don't like on a personal level, or even people whose work you don't like, you're still learning something from them, because you're learning what you don't want to do, or you don't want to work on, or you sort of like, you almost cherry pick bits from everybody that you're exposed to in that sense, and it makes you a better editor, a more rounded editor, and it also helps you decide what type of editing you want to do. So I think just one other thing on that actually is that I think the other thing about being an assistant is you gain confidence in handling pressure, handling intense, stressful situations, that if you're a sort of solo editor, like an at-home editor that perhaps isn't in that environment so much, a lot of editors I've spoken to, they've never sat in a room with a client before, because they didn't work in that environment, and they get in a room and they have a panic attack. It's so much pressure. Not all the time, of course, but a lot of the time it is. And it's stressful, and the expectation of you is high. And, you're dealing with a room full of people who someone wants a cup of tea, someone needs a phone charger, someone wants to know where the loo is, somebody wants to show you a really loud video on their laptop, and then 5 other people are telling you what to change in your car. And you have to be able to manage that calmly and get your job done. And if you haven't sort of had the exposure to it as an assistant, I think it can come as a shock. So I'm not putting down that route at all. I think it's brilliant that there is the ability to self-learn and figure out whether it's something that you want to pursue. But I think it's important to know that there is a downside to that. It's the running before you can walk thing. Yes, you might become an editor a little sooner, but there's a cost to it, I believe. And that it's just my opinion. So for me, my advice would be go somewhere and become an assistant. Try, find the companies whose work you like, find the people who you think you'll find inspiring to be around, and try and get a job in those places. Try, go as a runner if you have to. If you have more experience than that, go in as an assistant, and then sit and watch and learn, because it's really 50% of it. It really is, like, that exposure to the people who have the career you would then like to have.
I 100% agree with you, and I feel extremely lucky that in my early part of my career I was able to assist. And yes, I'm not editing now, and I've gone different paths, but what I learned from that experience is something, and I see it now, like you said, there are so many people doing great work. They have their laptop, they've got, even when you look at things like TikTok, like the ability to really understand how to craft little mini stories that are appealing, brands love, you can make money from, all of these things people are doing, and it's great. And actually, you probably could do quite well doing that. But if you want to work on a particular, the ASDA elves of this world, and the kind of brilliant work that you do at the assembly rooms, I think you do need to look at the path in which that assisting gives you, because yes, it's about learning, but it's also about relationship building.
Yeah.
And like you said, being in an edit, we're also used to sending things on WeTransfer and everything, but to have people in your edit suite is a whole other experience, and you can only learn that by seeing other editors do it when you're the assistant.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I remember just the food orders and but it's important. All these things are so important, and I think the best assistants are the ones that realize the importance of all the pieces and every cup of tea and all of that. So I think that's great advice.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope people enjoy watching this. I know that you will. And yeah, it's just been amazing to get insight into the fantastic ASDA ad with Elf, and a little bit about your career. And you can read some of Eve's career story on the Edit Girls website, which I'll share in the bits below this interview. And you can see her work on the Assembly Rooms website. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me. It's been lovely.
All right. Bye.
Bye.